Like, do we have any suckers for shows like Finding Bigfoot or documentaries about the Loch Ness Monster? Come on, there's got to be someone. Okay, there's no shame here. I love these shows. I don't watch TV very often. Usually, like when I'm in a hotel room and I have nothing else going on, I'll turn on the TV and this is what I turn on. And to be clear, I don't believe in these things for a second. I'm too much of a naturalist. I'm too much of a skeptic. I'm a follow the science kind of guy. And I need to see data. Like if I'm going to believe that Bigfoot is real, there's got to be like some sort of material remains, some sort of carcass out there that proves he's real. Now, I did learn recently from my sister, who is in deep with Bigfoot stuff, that experts, whatever that mean, understand him to be some sort of a spiritual being. And this is why he hasn't been found. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm going to have to go to the Bigfoot convention downtown next year and learn more. But still, there's some small part of me that wonders, what if? Like, could this stuff actually be true? And if so, what difference would it make? And so I find myself watching these shows, curious if the latest team of trackers has finally proved the existence of Bigfoot, or if they've finally captured the evidence they need to demonstrate that the Loch Ness Monster is real, as if they'd wait 6 months later to reveal it after the fact on the Discovery Channel. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think Jesus fits in the category of things like Sasquatch or Nessie, either in the evidence for them in the world or in the difference he makes in the world. As I see it, the evidence for Jesus is everywhere. His fingerprints are everywhere, starting with the fact that this morning, or afternoon, or whatever it is now, 2 billion people all around the world are worshiping this guy that 2,000 years ago, the Romans crucified on a cross. I mean, when you think about it, that's really very crazy, honestly. Like, how many of you know anybody else by name who was crucified by the Romans? Not many. I can only think of a few. And yet, here we are worshiping a man that they crucified. It could mean that 2 billion of us are drinking the Kool-Aid, or it could mean that something so significant happened 3 days after he died that news of it took the world by storm. I tend to think the latter. And not just that, but Jesus belongs to a class of his own. At the end of the day, no matter what you think about Nessie, no matter what you think about Sasquatch, the crucified, resurrected, ascended, and reigning Son of God must be of infinitely greater significance than a 7-foot hairy creature that walks like this. You all know what I'm talking about? There are no parallels. They aren't equals. There is no equation between the two. And so if shows about Bigfoot are interesting to watch, and if sermon bumpers like this are fun to watch, which I'm telling you it's going to be, you're not going to want to miss a week, how much more so is it worth investigating the stories of people who had real life encounters with a man who was there at creation, who will be there at the new creation, and who has the power to transform your life too? These are stories you've just got to hear. So over the next 8 weeks, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be reading stories about people's encounters with Jesus so we can see more clearly who Jesus is, what difference he makes in our lives, and what can happen when you encounter him in your life as well. And today we're going to start with the story of a man named Simon. So if you have a Bible with you, you can open up to Luke chapter 5. We're going to be hanging out there this morning, and if not, no big deal. We have all the words on the screen. But beginning in Luke chapter 5, verse 1, we read this. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him, listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. Okay, let's pause there. So this story takes place at a site called the Lake of Gennesaret, or as we usually call it, the Sea of Galilee. It's the same body of water. It has 2 different names. It's kind of at that size where people are like, is it a lake? Is it a sea? Well, let's just give it two names. We can't decide. And so that's what we got, the Lake of Gennesaret, the Sea of Galilee. And whatever you call it, it's this beautiful, serene body of water with hills all around. It's a place that I'd love to take a group of you someday when things settle down over there. It's a special, sacred place that I wish every Jesus follower could experience. And it's got natural amphitheaters like this one that you see here, where a person can actually talk at a normal volume and be heard by crowds all around. Your voice just sort of naturally carries up when you speak in one of these places. And this seems to be one reason why Jesus makes this place a home base for his ministry. He has so many people around that want to hear what he's got to say that he's got to leverage spaces just like this to speak to the crowds. And on this particular day, we're told that the crowds were so large that he couldn't even preach from the shoreline. Everybody was pressing up against him, and so he decides to get into a boat. By the way, just to name it, if this isn't Parker Lowry's dream right here, preaching the word of God from a fishing boat, I don't know what is. In fact, check this out. I told Parker I was going to poke some fun at him this week, and you know what he sent me? Look at this. Can't tell, zoom in. Parker Lowry casting lines with Jesus and the boys, okay? And if you think I'm giving Parker a hard time, listen, this guy, he didn't even just make this for today. He already had this on his phone just because. Okay, this is the guy's dream right here. I'm not even sure why I'm preaching, but I'm here. And so anyway, this is what we're talking about. This is the context for the story. Jesus is preaching to huge crowds from a boat in a lake. Picking up then in verse 4, we read this. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." All right, pause here. Again, Parker's dream. Jesus wraps up his sermon and says, let's go fishing. And we're already in the boat. Let's do this thing. And you'd think that given how popular Jesus is, Simon would jump all over that. Like cast some lines with Jesus? You bet. But notice how he responds. Picking up in verse 5, Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything." All right, pause again. Not the response we might expect. Simon says, not interested. Why is that? Well, on one level, to a professional fisherman like Simon, this probably seemed like a complete waste of time. For starters, it was the daytime, and so the nets that they used, which were big and really visible, would have been seen by the fish, and so it wouldn't have been very productive. Second, as verse 2 said, they had just washed their nets, which was an intricate and lengthy process. And so this would have meant getting them out and going through that whole process all over again. And then third, they hadn't caught anything the night before. And so why would they think that they might catch fish now when their odds were far worse? And so on the surface, this probably sounded naive and presumptuous to a fishing pro like Simon. I like how New Testament scholar Darrell Bach describes it. He says, it's a little like a pastor telling a CEO how to run technical aspects of his business. Think Dan Walter going to the guys at Chief and giving them his 2 cents on how to redesign the mall, right? Like, Dan's a savvy guy. I trust him with a lot of stuff. His ideas aren't probably going too far there. And that's at least part of what's going on here. Jesus' ideas probably sounded naive to a fishing pro like Simon. But that's not all. If we probe a little deeper and do a little psychoanalysis, I wonder if Simon's excuse also betrays a deeper insecurity, a thing beneath a thing, an underlying sense of failure and inadequacy. And this is why he says, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything." In other words, it's not just that Simon's the pro and he knows that Jesus' idea won't get him anywhere, although that may be part of it. Even more, it's that Simon's the guy who's tried his hardest, who's done everything he can to hold it all together, to provide for his family, to eke out a living, and yet he's struggling. He feels like a failure. He feels inadequate. He He feels like life isn't going as he's planned. He keeps giving his best to a job he's given his life to, but at the end of the day, or in this case, at the end of the night, he keeps coming up empty. When we think about it that way, I wonder if Simon's feeling isn't something that we can relate to as well. We may live 2,000 years later and 6,000 miles away, but I wonder if these feelings of failure and inadequacy aren't things we struggle with as well. A few weeks ago, a cohort that I'm in published this book. It's called And Upon This Rock, Peter's Transformative Journey from Fisherman to Follower to Foundational Leader. It's a mouthful. I didn't come up with the title, but here it is. It's the number one new release in Christian New Testament criticism, for whatever that's worth. Probably the only new release in Christian New Testament criticism. But my friend Noah, who pastors a church in Ohio, wrote a chapter about this particular story in this book. And in it, he shares about a vulnerable moment in ministry when he suffered a mental breakdown at the edge of a lake after he watched his church, which he was leading, slide from 400 to 130 people. This is what he writes. Many are drawn into ministry because of the powerful images and stories we discover in Scripture at one time or another. Like those we read about in the Bible, we want to watch God work miraculously through our efforts. We want to encounter the ecstatic milestone prayer gatherings which lead to the third heaven. Many of us romanticize suffering for Jesus while reading Paul's jailhouse and shipwreck stories. I'm not too proud to say that I did. And yet there I was, not in jail, nor on the guillotine block for Jesus. I was by the water with a tattered ego, severe depression, and questioning absolutely everything. People I loved and tirelessly served for years were departing my ministry quicker than I could prevent. And as their pastor, I viewed this as personal rejection and vocational failure. He goes on to write about how he sought validation and understood his identity in his work. And as a result, when his work all came crashing down, or so it seemed, so did he. Like Peter in his boat, Noah found himself there at the side of a lake, ready to throw in a towel and call it quits. And I wonder if there isn't something there that resonates with you, or something from Peter's story that resonates with you. Maybe like Peter, you're struggling at work. You took a new job, trying to launch this new business. You've got this new project you've been tasked with, and nothing's working out. Like you're doing your best, but it's not working, and you're not really sure what to do next. Or maybe for you, your issue is more financial. You're stretched to the max, might be working 2 jobs, overtime even. You're trying to get ahead, but just when you think you can put your next paycheck in the bank, a new bill shows up. The car needs repaired, the AC stopped working. Or maybe for you, your work life is great, but you feel like a failure at home. You don't know how to talk to your spouse without getting in a fight. This morning, you came here like you're smiling now, but you gave each other the silent treatment on the whole drive here. And your kids used to be your refuge, but they're pulling away too. Not just that, but they're growing up and making mistakes. And everything you seem to say or do just seems to make things worse. Or maybe for you, it's something else. An addiction that keeps calling you back. Or maybe it's an issue with your body image. You don't like what you see in the mirror. Or maybe it's just your body doesn't do what it used to do, and you're struggling to accept this new reality in life. We all know feelings of inadequacy. The feeling like, I've already tried, and I've already failed, and so what's the use? I've been there. Simon's been there. Noah's been there. And if that's where you are today, I want to suggest that just as he did with Simon, Jesus might also want to encounter you right there. Right in your boat, right in your mess, right in your feelings of dejection and disappointment, saying, let's try one more time. But this time, with me. Notice what happens when Simon comes alive to this truth. Picking up in verse 5, he says, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets. Pause. At this moment, Simon may feel inadequate. He may feel like a failure. He may feel like a disappointment. But these might be some of the most insightful words ever spoken. But because you say so. If you have a Bible with you, go ahead and circle this line. Mark it, highlight it, do whatever you have to do so that the next time you read this story, you don't miss it. Because this is where the story turns. This is where Simon's life changes, when despite his doubts, he takes whatever small scrap of faith he has with him and is willing to give Jesus a shot in this. He says, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets. And then notice what happens when he lets down the nets. Verse 6, when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. Imagine that. And so they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. I mean, talk about a big fish story. Their nets were breaking. Their boats were sinking, all because of this catch of fish. And what I want you to see is that this is the type of stuff that happens when Jesus enters your story. He takes our failures and turns them into fruitfulness. He takes our scarcity and turns it into his supply. He takes our worn out efforts and provides an outcome that only God can. And he's not asking for a lot from us. He's not asking for you to have all the answers, to have everything figured out, to have the perfect life, and then reach out to him. All he's asking is for your because you say so. As Jesus says elsewhere, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. That's a promise from Jesus. Nothing will be impossible for you. And it won't be because of anything you do. Now, this is why Jesus gave Simon such a ridiculous request. It's so Simon would understand that what is impossible for him is in fact impossible with God. And if you're here today and you've never made the decision to follow Jesus, if you've never let him take control of your boat, here's my simple ask for you. Will you test him in this? Will you test him and see if his way isn't actually the best way? If he can't do for you what he did for Simon? I think most of those with us today who have made this decision to make Jesus their captain would say it's the best decision they've ever made. It's the decision they can look back on, hang their hat and say, because I did that, I have a different outlook on life. I have a different perspective on life, and I have a new purpose in life. Of course, I also think that most who've made that decision would say that just because Jesus is your captain doesn't mean that life is going to be smooth sailing. Just because you say a prayer in a worship center and get dunked in a baptistry doesn't mean your problems are all going to go away. If anything, it's actually probably going to get harder. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who lost his life standing up to the Nazi regime, once said, when Jesus calls a man, he bids him come and die. Bonhoeffer understood from the scriptures that there's a cost to following Jesus. And when he followed Jesus in his own context, he paid the price with his own life. Jesus' promise isn't that life will be easier, and that he'll give you success in whatever vision you have for your life. That would be the takeaway of the story if the encounter story stopped right here, but it doesn't. It keeps going, and so let's read on. Picking up in verse 8. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. and so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Now notice here that when Simon sees Jesus for who he is, he comes to have a better understanding of himself, that he is a sinner who is totally unfit to be in the presence of someone like Jesus. This much he understands and gets right. But what he still doesn't understand is that this is exactly where Jesus needed him to be if he was going to live the life that Jesus envisioned for him. To quote Darrell Bach again, the premise behind this remark is that a man of God surely would want to have nothing to do with an everyday sinner. What Peter does not realize is that admitting one's inability in sin is the best prerequisite for service, since then one can depend on God. Peter's confession becomes his resume for service. Humility is the elevator to spiritual greatness. And so Jesus responds, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." This is what the story leads to. This is the antidote for Simon's feelings of inadequacy, the real reason why Jesus got in the boat that day, and the promise that Simon could hang his hat on. It's not that Jesus would give Simon success in Simon's vision for his life, although he could. He just demonstrated that. It's that Jesus would give him success in Jesus' vision for his life, if he would only be humble, open, and willing to step into it, which Simon does. Verse 11, so they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. And I want to suggest today that the same is true for us. Jesus doesn't promise to give us exactly what we want in life, whatever we want in life. Truth is, what we want may not be the best thing for us in life. What I want is rarely what I most need. But Jesus does promise to give us success in his vision for our lives if, like Simon, we're humble, open, and willing to step into it. So what does this mean for us? Well, for one, it means that, like Simon, he might call you out of what you're doing into something new. This past Thursday, I spent the day with a group of about 50 ministers from across the state who were all wondering and wrestling the same question. How can we call and equip the next generation of church leaders? Because the truth is, we're looking at the reality, how many people are going to be retiring in the next few years in churches all across the state, and the supply that's being provided. And I want to say, if that's you, if you felt a nudge and wondered if God has maybe called you into full-time ministry, if this is like something that maybe you need to discern, I'd love to have a talk with you to help you explore what that might look like and how we could maybe surround and support you here at Third City. I've seen it time and time again, especially here at our church, where Jesus takes a person with a background, with training and experiences in one area of work, and reorients it for his purposes in the ministry world. Whether it's a math professor become a church accountant, a music teacher become worship leader, a school aide become a kids minister, or a DJ turned tech creative. Jesus has always been about the work of reorienting people from one sort of work towards another analogous sort of work in his mission field. Now, I wonder if there's someone out there right now who's getting a nudge, or Jesus is calling you. Maybe he has something new for you in life. And if so, I'd love to talk to you. But my guess is that for most of you, it might not look like a career change so much as it looks like a new understanding of what your life's purpose is in whatever space you're in, whether it's in a school, in a medical office, on a farm, or at a meatpacking plant. You may have thought that your purpose was tied to your performance at work, and success looks like promotions, pay raises, and prestige, and this is why you're ultimately feeling empty in life, because you're seeking validation in things that can't actually give you that. But maybe Jesus wants to hop in your boat and help you get a better understanding of who he is, and in light of that, who you are, what he's tasked you to do, and what success for you actually looks like. And so what I want to do right now is to give you space to encounter Jesus in your own boat. It's one thing to read about someone else's encounter with Jesus. It's another thing for you to encounter Jesus yourself. So here's what we're going to do. If you're open and willing to do this, you don't have to. There's no pressure here. But if you're open, I just invite you to close your eyes and just to hold out your hands. Just in a posture that says, I'm humble, I'm open, I'm available to receive whatever it is you have for me today. Again, you don't have to do this. No one's making you do anything, just an invitation. You're welcome here no matter what. But if you're willing to do this, I'm going to ask you just to take a deep breath. And to imagine. Imagine your boat. Not Simon's boat, your boat. The space in your life where you've been working hard, the place where you've been giving your all, your energy, your time, your heart. Yet for all that effort, it still feels like you're coming up empty. What is that space for you? It's your job, your family, your faith, your health. Now picture Jesus walking toward you. He's not disappointed. He's not shaking his head at you. He's calm, he's confident, he's kind. And he steps right into your space, right into your exhaustion, right into the place that feels like failure. And he turns to you and says, to you, let's try again. What would it look like for you to trust him in that space? What would it mean for you to say, because you say so? Maybe you need to just say that right now. But because you say so. Is there a purpose you hear Jesus calling you into? If so, what would it take for you to leave everything behind so you can fully follow him?